Russ has been downstairs sitting at his table signing for 2 days now. And an awful lot of people who wanted to see him were able to see him there and talk to him and get things done. So we have a relatively small turnout here. Part of that fits the way I wanted to conduct this, and that is, I think we can kind of keep it conversational. You know, this is not the ultimate biography I'm going to interview. We're just going to have a talk where we can be a little more aware of what Russ's thinking was at different points in his career, etc. I really, really encourage Q&A, because it's only a bunch of us here. It's like being at my house. We're trying to see if we can maybe get a mic to you. We probably can't. So my point is, when you have questions, I may have to repeat them to Russ, because he won't be able to hear you without a microphone. See if that's cool. My name's Bill Gross. And of course, this is Russ Heath. I made some notes. Now I'm going to make an assumption here. How many people here know his work? I mean, everybody. Okay. So that helps. That it's not introducing to his work. It's talking to people who know his work. There. Let me put on the right glasses. Russ and I met in 1970 in New York City when I was doing National Lampoon as an art director. And I was aware of his work, but prior to National Lampoon, I'd never art directed comics in any way, shape, or form. I wasn't in that industry. And the needs of National Lampoon, part of them were to start to parody other comics that already existed, or beyond that, create fresh comics in an adult humor format. So I was finding myself in a position of having to hire comic artists who I'd really never worked with before, because I was kind of late to that game. And so I identified my style, word of mouth, etc. And Russ came in the door, and there's one thing I remember loving about day one of Russ's work, and it's still true today, because he's never lost that hand, is that beautiful, clean reality defined with drama, very filmic, very solid, very real, great storytelling, and not to mention just very beautiful, beautiful art. So, Russ was born in 1926, is that correct?
26.
26. And you're Russ Jr. Who was Russ Sr.? What did he do? Your dad, what did he do?
22.
No, your dad. Your father?
Oh, my father?
What did he do?
He was, well, he had been a cowboy, and he worked in the oil fields, and he worked in copper mines in Arizona. And then he started working for Westinghouse International in New York City.
Was he, when did you discover you were an artist, and how did he deal with that?
I think I was probably 15 before. I guess I was exceeding my peers from about 4 and a half. That's the best I can figure it now, anyway. And the only question I ever had was, I didn't understand why everybody else can't do the same thing. I don't feel that I have something that other people don't have.
Well, I actually shared that. I remember telling someone that I would lose sleep up into my teens because when I woke up one day and couldn't do it anymore, I don't know why I could have done it to start with, let alone why other people can't do it. I said, no, you just do this. No, my other point was, how did your father react to you being an artist?
He was from Canada, and he was kind of close-mouthed and didn't have, I don't remember any particular reactions. He did go and buy, in the Depression era times, 2 newspapers so that we had more funnies to look at each day, and get down on the floor and pour over the latest comics. And of course they were big then, 3 or 4 inches, not 1.5 inches like they are now. And it was even the smell of the paper was good. I mean, fresh newsprint. And he also bought me tablets. They used to have these little OK tablets that, I guess it was letter paper or something. And for many years I filled those up. And then he says, now you gotta write on, you gotta do it on the back of them as well as the front, because they're expensive.
But he encouraged you?
Yeah, I'd rather say I wasn't discouraged.
I was a working class family.
As an only child, I wanted to do what I wanted to do.
Well, I was a working class family. They believed that every artist would either starve to death or cut his ear off. And the idea that they accepted me as an artist was a big deal because that encouragement kept me going. So I was just wondering if your father's encouragement was part of you moving forward or not.
I don't think so. I never remember much encouragement.
But he was a cowboy.
Hmm?
But he was a cowboy.
Yes.
And that influenced why you immediately did westerns.
Yes. Well, all boys. There wasn't television in those days, and all kids ran outside to play cowboys and Indians. I thought he might have been a sissy cowboy because he said he never killed an Indian. But, I put up with it.
And it seems like you almost answered this because of your love of watching the funnies, but once you knew you could draw, why did you take the form, why did you decide it would be comics, not any other kind of painting or anything else?
I guess it was a matter of exposure. I had those funnies to read every day of the week, and I wasn't interested in fine art. The comics were very appealing to a smaller kid. And I wasn't smaller than the rest of them.
So, as I understand it, according to my research, the very first comics you did were like 1947?
The first comics I did was, was in high school, the last 2 years before I was 18, so that must have been 16 and 17. I did work for Hammerhead. Ollie was a strip that was in Holyoke magazines, and that was a comic company at the time. And he knew somebody on the train from riding a train back and forth. You talk to people, and he knew somebody that knew of this job available at Holyoke. So he says, take your pictures and go over there. And I did, and they gave me a script, and I went home and drew it, and took it back, and they said it's fine, and here's another one. That was about as complicated as it was. They did say it's not pen and ink, you're under misapprehension, it's brush and ink. So he gave me some Winsor Newton number 7s to learn to teach myself how to work with a brush rather than a pen. And it didn't bother me to switch over. In a couple of weeks it was switched. And does that answer your?
Well, not only that, but you have one of the most identifiable and perfected pen lines in the history of comics. Your brushwork is almost the first thing. I mean, we've been attracted to your work because your brushwork, your formal styling, your movie style storytelling. But I was always fascinated with 2 things about your career. Doing westerns and doing war stories. And as I understand it, as a lot of people who have interviewed you before have said, a lot of your fascination was dealing with the reality of it.
Yeah, well, my father they used to have serials at the movie houses on Saturdays, and they'd have westerns and whatever, Tarzan or whatever. But the westerns were my favorites, and of course, him having been a cowboy, he would see a cowboy would come on with a rose-colored roses on his shirt or something, you know, and he says, that's no cowboy in the world would wear a shirt like that. So I realized that if I wanted people to believe I knew what I was talking about, I better try to convince them I knew the facts. And that was kind of a lifelong thing. If you want soldiers to appreciate your work, you better know your stuff. Not have them say, this guy's never been near a weapon in his life, you know, or something. So I was always trying to make it as real as possible. And I'm very literal-minded anyway. And so I got into that, and Westerns and underwater stuff, war stuff. War is all rubble. You don't have to rule straight lines like you do in Batman with all the windows.